Okay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next presenter, and his name is Rod Connect. Rod served as Chief of Police for the Edmonton, Canada Police Service from 2011 to 2018. He was previously the Senior Deputy Commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, ranked as the most senior uniformed police officer. Prior to his appointment in Ottawa, Rod was the Deputy Commissioner of the Northwest Region. Over his 42-year policing career, Rod spent the vast majority of his time working in an operational capacity with significant expertise in serious crimes, drug enforcement, undercover investigations, uniform duties, and intelligence gatherings. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rod Connect.
So good morning, everybody. And it is indeed a pleasure to be with you here today. Particularly, I left a climate that was about 30 degrees Fahrenheit here. So I'm just going to go over a case study here over the next half hour, and it's how we turned a significantly tragic event for the police service into an opportunity to create a very resilient organization into the future. So what I'll talk about is I'll introduce the police culture a little bit in Edmonton. I'll go through the case study briefly, and then I'll talk about our employee and family assistance program and our response to making Edmonton a more resilient police service into the future. So I've got a quote up here from Chaplain Bob Harper. Chaplain Harper was a chaplain with the RCMP during a time where we had 9 fatalities within the police service. 7 were homicides, and 2 of those were car accidents where members lost their lives. And Chaplain Harper, who through his giving over an extensive period of time, 15 years of policing, took early retirement as a consequence of the impact it had on him. And Chaplain Harper said to me after about we had 4 police officers killed at one single event. They were ambushed by an individual, and Chaplain Harper said, every time it happens, it takes a piece of your soul, and that's stuck with me to this day. And I think he was quite accurate in his statement. So I apologize, you probably can't see those very good, but anyway, line of duty deaths. Policing is akin to being part of a family. I would say it's similar to a military family to the extent that we have common training. It becomes a lifestyle to us. It's a way of life, not only for us, but our family members as well. And when it happens, when we have a line of duty death, it strikes at the very foundation of the organization and the individuals in it. And there is a little bit of a differentiation. We tend to, I think we feel the impact as an organization and as individuals when it is a violent occurrence where a police officer is killed by a perpetrator, as opposed to when they're killed by accident. And they're both tragic events. It just seems to strike deeper when it's a violent event. And the impact is like throwing a boulder in a calm pond, and it reverberates back to shore. And what I mean by that is the folks that are closest to where that rock hits the water are impacted, I guess, most significantly and the longest. And as those waves go outwards in the calm pool, they strike the other members of the organization, family members, community members, and then it tends to reverberate back once it hits the shore. Those waves come back, and due to the way the system works, we can be impacted again and again and again by a line of duty death. Post-event is often followed by a period of insecurity by our personnel and questioning and doubt that leads to we have internal reviews of the event where we try to often, which probably isn't the best idea, is we try to find fault. We also have public investigations, again, to find fault, and fatality inquiries, which are not to find fault, but to find better ways to react to a similar event into the future. And again, in a line of duty death, we're challenged by the media who dissect that. Initially, it's a, they have a cookie cutter formula that they follow. There's initially a period of sympathy and wanting to interview victims and families and that, and then they tend to turn against the organization. What did you do wrong? Why did you do it? You could have done this better. And this has just been exacerbated by social media. As Kirk said, I see very little value in social media. And there's a sustained impact when there's a line of duty death. It just seems to go on, and we oftentimes, we have a lot of memorials in policing. I know in my world, we have a memorial every September for all our fallen officers. We have another one in October, and a national one once a year. And these sometimes tend to, again, reverberate or relive the incident over and over again. So this is what we've learned post the incident of a police officer. I'm going to get into the line of duty death that involved one of our folks most recently. And what we've learned is that the police service, and I think you can apply this to almost any organization, certainly the military as well, but that the organization that proactively embraces resilience through policies, programs, planning, and practices will be positioned for not only enduring a line of duty death, but becoming stronger through individual officers and as an organizational entity. So I'll quickly go through this case study. It happened on June 8th, 2015. Constable Dan Woodall, 35 years old, a really good guy, great sense of humor, got along with everybody. He's married with 2 young children, one preschool and one in grade 2. He had 8 years of service with the Edmonton Police Service, so he's an experienced officer at that point. And he had 7 years with the Manchester Police Service in England. So he immigrated from Canada, or from England to Canada to be a member of our police service. That was his sole reason for coming here, and his family came with him. And he was on the hate crimes unit, and that's a unit that deals with, obviously, people that are perpetuating hate. And he was, on the evening in question, around 6 p.m., they were just going to deal with this individual and then go for a late supper. And he was serving an unremarkable warrant on with 2 other officers. So there was the 3 of them. 1 remained in the car. The 2 went up to the door. And I say it's unremarkable because they would do this probably 2, maybe 3 nights a week. They would go and arrest somebody for a hate crime and process them, and sometimes release them, sometimes not release them, take them before the courts. On this particular incident, low level, individuals not violent, and he expressed some hatred online towards a former friend of his, and he was sort of ramping up online and getting worse and worse online as far as his aggression towards this individual. So what the 3 officers were going to do that night is essentially go, serve him with some paper, arrest him, serve him with some paper, and release him right away. So 2 of them went to the door and knocked on the door, talked to him through the window. He wouldn't open the door. It was found out later that he'd barricaded the door. Anyway, they had a conversation with him. They said, come on out, we'll take you before a justice of the peace, release you, and you'll be back home within the hour. And he said he wasn't coming out, acting a little unstable. And so what they did was they called in for a search warrant. So they phoned, another person filled out a search warrant. They came to the house. And as they came up to the house, they said, look, we're coming in. He refused to open the door, and at that point, they were just actually picking the lock of the door to gain entry, at which time he started to shoot through the door. His first shot struck one of the fellows that was actually picking the lock. He was injured in the leg, and he returned to duty a couple of weeks later, and he's fine today. Constable Woodall was wearing his vest. He was struck once in the throat. He was struck once below the vest, and he was struck once in the vest, and he died almost immediately thereafter. The bad guy lit his house on fire and perished in the fire. After shooting, he probably shot, I'm going to say, between 100 and 125 shots into the street, into the houses across the street, into police cars. So there was a response, obviously. And what we'd experienced in the Edmonton Police Service is we hadn't had an on-duty death for 25 years. And the way our organization works is the vast majority of people retire after 25 years. So they'll do 25 years of policing, and they get some training, some experience and knowledge, and they go on to a second career. So essentially we had an organization that had never experienced an on-duty death. Yes, we had some folks that were a little longer in the tooth with 27, 30 years service, but the majority of our people, particularly obviously our young people, had never experienced an on-duty death. So this was extremely traumatic. We had the best equipment and the best training at the time, but when the incident happened, it was officer down, and 86 cars attended the scene immediately, and approximately 200 police officers. And what that was almost every police car in the city attended the scene. We left the city unprotected, essentially. 200 police officers attended, plus we had folks self-deploy, which is, again, through the magic of social media, people twittering out, or tweeting out, or sending text messages. People were sitting at home, police officers were sitting at home, and they self-deployed to the scene. So we had a mass of people, to the point where ambulance and emergency services were having difficulty attending the scene. And we had a communication challenge, which is all family members, folks that were sitting at home and now learning that a police officer had been shot critically and a second police officer had been shot, all wanted to know, is that somebody I know? Is that a colleague? Is that a loved one? Is that a husband? Is it a family member? Completely shutting down our communication system. And a number of rumors began to circulate immediately that there wasn't enough police officers in attendance, that the tactical team was unavailable. These sorts of things started to again manifest themselves on social media. So immediate post-incident, we had organizational paralysis. Everybody's essentially shut down. They'd never experienced this before, and it was very difficult, both administratively and operationally, our civilian people and our sworn police officers. What we saw over the following weeks and into months, we saw increased incidents of aggression by our police officers. So they were taking liberties with their powers of authority. We had over deployments at most every incident, even the smallest incident. We would have 3 or 4 police cars would attend because our officers were feeling insecure, and there was unwarranted and irrational fear throughout the organization. And what we saw over the following months was an increased use of sick leave and stress leave. So shortly after the incident, we saw we had some issues and some problems, so how are we going to deal with this? Now, there was a funeral for Constable Woodall in Edmonton. There was also a funeral. His body was transported back to England, and there was a funeral there as well. And what we held was a memorial for our police officers and the public to attend. And we did a march. We had approximately 25,000 citizens of Edmonton line that parade march to a location where we had a memorial service, and 4,000 police officers attended that memorial service. We had immediate communications where we would get out. I did a number of town halls throughout the city to tell people exactly what happened, how it happened, and why it happened, and a number of communiques, videos, etc. We also created a protocol for communicating with families, which we never had before. So if we were going to have one of these incidents into the future, we were going to reach out to the family so they knew what was happening with their loved ones while they were on duty. And we find, obviously, that when the loved ones know what's going on, our police officers are not distracted and they're able to do their job better and provide community service a lot better. We did a full equipment review to see if, in fact, we did have shortcomings there, and I'm happy to say we did not. We had a protocol for dispatch so that our communication system wasn't plugged up into the future, so we improved there. And we came up with a member death protocol, not only when there was a violent incident, but if we had a member that passed away, was involved in a car accident, or even a family member was involved in a significant issue, we had a member death protocol set up. We also conducted a wellness survey. We wanted to know from our people what we could do better, how we could make our organization and its people and family members more resilient as an organization. So what we did is, through the lens of resilience, we looked at all our policies, all our plans, processes, and practices, and we changed them accordingly to be better responsive to the needs of our frontline people. And we did that in 2 lanes. So we looked at it, how are we going to deal with traumatic stress, as in the death of a police officer, and cumulative stress. So we had 2 lanes set up. One was critical incident stress management, and a lot of the folks in the room may be aware of that. We actually borrowed that from the United States. And we had member support services. So 2 paths to deal with the challenges that our members were experiencing both on a day-to-day occurrence as well as in serious incidents. So critical incident stress affects nearly 90% of emergency personnel. It's founded out of emotionally charged events. The effects can be intensified, influenced, or mitigated by our personal, family, and developmental issues. Symptoms usually subside within a few weeks for the majority of first responders, but obviously not all our first responders. So what we did as an organization is we set up a full-time coordinator for critical incident stress management, and that individual is in charge of a team. He applies the CISM practices to events, assesses and sends out contacts, coordinates our training, does new member selection, and presentations to internal and external units. So we present inside our organization as well as outside our organization to community groups, as well as other police services and emergency services. We have a team of 88 trained personnel within the Edmonton Police Service, and just to give you a bit of an idea, we have 2,700 people. So 88 trained people, 79 of those are sworn members, and 9 of those are civilian personnel to deal with our complement of 600 civilian people within the organization. So what do they deal with? It's mandatory. They deal with shootings causing death or serious injury, obviously, suicides, incidents involving children, so child exploitation, child trafficking, vehicle fatalities when the victim is known by the police officers, industrial fatalities, as well as trigger events, which are something that's happened in that police officer's past that he is involved in a situation, perhaps a domestic situation, where that's a trigger event for them and they need some support and help, as well as cumulative events, and that was, I think, was spoken of by Jeff as well. So there's accumulation of, yeah, I've gone to 5 incidents as a police officer where they've been fairly traumatic, but it doesn't affect me, and it's that 6th incident where all of a sudden I'm having trouble dealing with it. And these are mandatory for our personnel to attend. So critical incident stress management, psychological first aid, immediate debriefing post-incident. So as soon as the incident happens, we send a team out and they deal with the individual or the team or both. And focuses on the police officer, not on the incident. And we do an assessment and direct that individual to recovery. So we give them options, opportunities, and essentially act as a traffic cop to allow that person to get the support they need, specific to the incident and the situation they're having to deal with. So it's a bit of a field assessment. What psychological first aid is not, it's not something only professionals can do. Police officers and civilian members trained can do this. It is not professional counseling. It's not asking people to analyze what happened or put time and events in order. It is not pressuring people to tell their feelings or reactions to an event. What it is making a connection, helping people feel safe, being kind, calm, and compassionate, listening, and listening, giving assurances, helping people connect with outside services, whatever services they think they need and what the CISM people think they need. And connecting those people to those services. Again, these services are very difficult sometimes. If you've never dealt with them, you don't know how to navigate through them. And these folks help you navigate through processes, paperwork, as we all know, and some of the challenges that we face just to get the services that we need. And it's giving timely and accurate information. And of course, first and foremost, it's caring. It's part of the organization, making sure our most valuable asset is taken care of. So part 2 of our program, which is more the cumulative stress that our members will experience. There's 8 programs within this broader program. I'll just go through them very quickly individually, and again, I apologize you can't see them because of the color. But in large bureaucratic organizations like police services and the military, the bureaucracy can bog you down where it becomes debilitating. What we did is we found that our bureaucracy, if somebody needed help post-incident, they had to fill out a pile of paperwork, and then eventually the system would catch up to them, and by then it was too late. So we have a process in place. So a frontline supervisor can immediately approve on scene if they think you need some time off. You don't have to suck it up like in the old days. You are given time off immediately. Up to 48 hours can be approved immediately on site. And if you want to go longer than 40 hours, then you put it to the Human Resources Officer or myself as the Chief of Police, and we can approve that unlimited leave for that person to get to a better place. The other thing we have is we have a preferred provider list, and that preferred provider list is we've already identified 18 psychologists and a psychiatrist that are on sort of 24-hour watch. We can call them at any time, and they show up right away. As opposed to in the old days, again, you fill out a bunch of paperwork, and maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, you can get in for an appointment. We have people that are on call 24/7 to help deal with our people immediately after an incident. It's confidential, and all the costs are paid for by the police service, so there's no financial burden that our people have to feel, and there's no limit on that. I know when I was with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, we were allowed to have 10 visits to a psychologist, and you were supposed to magically be better after 10 visits, or 9, or 8, or 7. When I was with the Edmonton Police Service, it was unlimited. Until you got to a better place, you could see a psychologist. And we have mental wellness evaluations. So mental wellness evaluations are mandatory. So it takes the stigma away from, certainly when I was growing up in policing, is going to seek help, no matter where it was, I'm running out of time, is a weakness. And so we've tried to, we make it mandatory now, so it's not, you have to go for a wellness evaluation, particularly if you're in homicide, forensics, the high-risk groups. I'm going to rush through this because I still have about a half a dozen slides here. So it's mandatory for all our new sergeants and staff sergeants, so anybody that's going into a new leadership position has to have a mental wellness evaluation. And for every single member of our police service, every 4 years, they have to go through a mental wellness evaluation to make sure they're kicking on all 8 cylinders. A program we have is Road to Mental Wellness. It was developed by the Canadian military, adapted for policing, and it focuses on the effects of operational stress. And the foundation of R2MR is resilience. It's goal setting, mental rehearsal, self-talk, and arousal reduction. And it's taught not only to our recruits, but every single member of our police service. And this is a bit of a no-brainer, but fitness and lifestyle unit, it's making sure our people are taking care of themselves physically as well. We have mandatory, every year they have to go through a mandatory process to make sure they're in shape. We have programs set up for that, fitness classes, training programs, education, et cetera, et cetera. Sub-programs, we have a wives group. Now, we had a wives group before this, the death of Constable Woodall. It had about 20 ladies that would show up for this wives group about once every 6 months. Post-incident, the wives group has 400 spouses that attend, male and female. And that is a very robust group, and it provides tremendous support. And I did speak to the group when I was the chief about every 6 months. And that group continues to grow and become a tremendous resort and support mechanism for our frontline police officers. I think I'm down to my last 2 minutes here. So we have a chaplaincy program, a very, very robust chaplaincy program. Assists in major incidents, attends all calls of a serious nature, liaison with other clergy. So it covers all, they have representation from all religious groups and spiritual groups, provides confidential assistance, prevention of common stressors and communal grief, matrimonial family issues, as well as providing a ministerial presence, which is just being there for our members when they need to reach out. We find a lot of the millennials are not connected to any particular religion, but they want that support when a critical incident occurs, and our chaplaincy program is there to assist them. And finally, this is something relatively unique, and this is members of the community, businesses, our police foundation, and you may have heard hockey's kind of a big deal in Canada. And we have a hockey team in Canada that has a foundation that provides for this resource, which is emergency housing for our people. So if our folks are in a situation where they need to get out of the communal home, out of the house for a day or a few days, there's a residence where they can go and they can get help on a 24/7 basis. They can stay there for a period of time and have their needs tended to, so they can come back to work as productive members of the organization. And finally, just to sum up, we continue to create a culture of resilience. We're not completely there, but we're partway there. We have support, advice, engagement, and referrals for our members now. We've removed the stigma of seeking help and treatment as the first resort as opposed to the last resort or a late resort. We focused on resilience through leadership development, relationship primacy. It's been said relationships are so important to resiliency, and we make that priority one. And then every single program that we have within the Edmonton Police Service, we circle back and see how our people are. So once they're done, gone through any of the programs we have, we make sure we circle back on a regular basis so those individuals are diary dated to see them a week later, a month later, perhaps a year later, because that may be, they may relive it because of an anniversary or whatever. And that's our resilience program for the Edmonton Police Service. Thank you.